Hello and welcome to my channel. In this one I'm doing a graphite pencil drawing of Johnny Rico, the character from Starship Troopers, and if you would like to know more, keep watching. So we're starting off with a sketch, and you can see that I already had a simple graphite pencil sketch in place which I created by tracing. Now I'm going to draw a slightly more elaborate sketch, and I'm going to use slightly darker pencils here. The pencils I'm going to be using are Faber Castell matte graphite pencils. These are maybe a little bit darker and a little bit less reflective than conventional graphite pencils. But they do have their advantages and disadvantages. Anyway, like I said, the character I'm drawing is the main character from the movie Starship Troopers, Johnny Rico, played by Casper Van Dien. Here, as you can see, I'm starting with some slightly darker shapes, and now I'm going to shade the top part or the dome of his helmet. Some parts of it are a little bit lighter than the others, so I'm going to go gradually using a tapered stroke, building up the value bit by bit, and then cross-hatching a little bit and adding a little bit more value where needed. Of course, I will be using blending tools as well, because these matte graphite pencils do blend not quite as well as the regular graphite pencils, but they do blend. The paper I'm working on is the Fabriano sketching paper, which has a bit of a tooth, so it's going to help with the blending. The size is 9 × 11 inches. And like I said, I'm doing a little bit more work on the helmet. I'm first going to tackle that part before I move on to the most challenging part of the portrait, which is of course the face. The face itself is going to be challenging because the lighting is a little bit confusing, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. The reference photo is in the description as usual. It's just a movie still from the movie Starship Troopers. And here, this part between the helmet and the temple area is quite a bit darker, so I'm going in with a darker pencil here. I'm going to work with these Faber Castell matte graphite pencils for the most part, but the range of these is from HB to 14B, but because my 14B is pretty much almost spent, I will throw in a little bit of black colored pencil here and there, which is very similar because the 14B is pretty much like a black colored pencil, fairly dark. Anyway, as you can see here and there, I'm doing a little bit of blending with a brush, and that softens that texture a little bit in those areas which need to appear smoother. And of course, even with these tiny details like that part of the helmet where we have that darker line, you have to be careful with what's casting a shadow onto what. So the top part of that line or that edge is facing up, so I made it a little bit lighter because the light source is coming from above. There are also some of these smaller shapes, like these tiny slits in the front part of the helmet. I don't really know what those are, but I'm going to include them as well. So this is a futuristic sci-fi movie. It's about, well, the themes are kind of complex. A lot of people don't really know what to make of this movie, but it is a great science fiction action movie. Basically, you have space troopers fighting gigantic bugs. but it's a little bit deeper than that, obviously. I'm not going to get into that. There are many videos on YouTube analyzing the meaning and the topics of the movie. I'm mostly going to focus on the artistic aspect of it, and I'm mostly interested in my portrait right now. This is going to be a vignette, by the way, which means that I'm not going to do any background. I'm not going to draw all the way to the edge of the paper. I'm just going to fade my portrait around the shoulder and the chest area, and allow the composition to revolve around the face, to be focused on the face, the head. Just working on the eyes now, and this is where I need to be a lot more careful because this requires more precision. Casper Van Dien, like I said, is the name of the actor. Very good looking guy, and he portrays Johnny Rico, who is a very likable character, actually. Masculine and heroic, but at the same time very direct, very honest, kind of wears his heart on his sleeve type of guy. He has a couple of love interests in the movie, but we're not going to get into that, I suppose. Now the mouth. First I drew the shadow line between the upper and the lower lip, which is very important for the overall shape of the mouth, and now I'm doing the upper lip, which is going to be darker than the lower lip because it's facing away from the light. But the thing about the mouth, which I am going to try to capture, and it's not going to be easy, is the expression. It's kind of like he's clenching his lips. There is tension in his expression. He's focused and almost a little bit angry about something. Now, doing the other eye. This one is a little bit lighter because it's more exposed to the light, so both the white part of the eye and the iris are going to appear darker, and they're also or are going to appear lighter rather because they're in the light side of the face. There is more shadow on the left, and there's also some parts of the eye which will be catching a little bit of light, like almost some faint reflections, but nothing too dramatic. There won't be that much contrast there from what I see in the reference, and I'm going to stick to the reference. I'm not going to try to force any lighter details or reflections which aren't there. So the area around the mouth is going to be a little bit tricky, and of course this transition between the nose and the eye area, the eye socket area, is very important. You gotta capture the shape of the nose if you want to capture the likeness, but it's not always easy. It depends on the position of the face. It's easier when it's turning a little bit to the side. Here it is turning a bit to the side, but we're mostly looking at it from the front. So I'm shading the lower eyelid area now on the other eye, and I'm using multiple pencils. This is an HB. I'm using it when something either needs to be of lighter value or when I want to start with a lighter value and then gradually make it a little bit darker. This part of the face here is in the well, there's a shadow that's cast by the helmet. So this is going to be very dark, almost black. So I can just use a little bit more pressure here and cover this with some darker value just to get things moving. And then I'm going to have to shade the rest of the face, try to capture the shape of the nose area properly, and also to shade the cheek and the cheekbone area so that these prominent cheekbones of his will stand out. There are some lighter reflective details here on the chin part of the helmet. I see no other way, and here on the side as well. I see no other way how to do that other than just reserving the white space and then working around it. I can try to erase, and erasing can work to a certain extent, but these matte graphite pencils, they are not really known for erasing that well. In that respect, they are kind of similar to colored pencils, so if you try to erase smaller details, it'll be difficult to get clean edges, so that's going to be a limitation there. So it's better to reserve the white space if you want some smaller, lighter details. And of course this area is a lot darker, so I'm going to shade it with a considerably more or a darker value. But I will also switch between lighter and darker pencils in my attempt to capture that range of value we see there, because some parts of it are just a little bit lighter than the others, some parts of it are a little bit darker. This movie, by the way, has lots of very interesting characters to draw. Lots of interesting characters. In fact, one of the good things about the movie is how well developed some of those characters are. And like I said, it's not just an action flick, it's a little bit more serious than that. So here I'm getting into the tricky area. I'm trying to shade the face, but the reference photo, like I said, is a little bit tricky because I can't really. It's a little bit difficult to understand some parts of the topography of the face, probably because the face is largely in the shadow. And there is a little bit of reflected light here and there. So if the face was well lit from the front, for example, it would be easier maybe for me to explain some of these shapes, but this way I will have to push myself to try to understand the shapes and to try to capture the same or similar values that I see in the reference photo. His eyebrows are also pretty interesting because they're kind of large and a little bit bushy, but they're of lighter color. So depending on the lighting, they can appear a little bit less noticeable, less conspicuous here. Because of the shadow, especially on the left side, they will appear a little bit thicker and a little bit darker. I hope that won't kind of get in the way of me trying to capture the likeness of the actor. It's also very important for me to shade this eye socket area. I also feel like I have a little bit too much volume in the cheekbone area, so I'm going to have to shave that down a little bit. But none of that can be done like all at once or instantaneously. You just have to be patient. There are some parts of this shading process when you're drawing portraits which can be a little bit frustrating because the likeness is not quite there, but you see, it's important that you see which parts are problematic. So as long as you can see that something is off, that's good, because if you see that something is off, you can still improve that. When you can't see what's wrong, well, that's a problem. Of course, you can never be 100% accurate because, as I always tell people, a man is not a photocopier machine, so every drawing is going to be basically his interpretation or her interpretation of what they see, and it's going to be the same with this portrait here as well. I did a little bit of additional shading on the left side of the face. I kind of shaded down a little bit, made it a little bit narrower, and I think that now the face is a bit closer to what it's supposed to look like. And doing a little bit of work around the mouth. Like I said, I want to capture that intensity, that tense appearance of his jaw and mouth area. Now I need to do a little bit of work around the lips. Every now and then I blend a little bit with brushes, but here I am going to try to do a little bit of erasing. This time using a kneaded eraser or a kneadable eraser to lift up a little bit of that value and make some parts of the lips a little bit lighter. So basically it's just like drawing, but this time drawing lighter marks, or lighter shapes rather. In addition to the kneadable eraser, I can also use some other erasers like Tombow Mono Zero. That also works, but again, they both have their advantages and disadvantages. I want some lighter details on the rim of that helmet as well, so that maybe that edge is reflecting a little bit of light. Now moving on to the neck area here, but I'll finish that a little bit later. There's still a little bit more work to be done on this strap around the chin, as well as the right side of the helmet, or his left side. And I'm using multiple matte graphite pencils, from the lightest, which is HB, to the slightly darker 4B, 6B, 8B, depending on what I need. But honestly, you don't, to get a nice range of value, you don't really need that many of them. You can get away with using just maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4, especially because for some of the darkest bits I'm just going to use a black colored pencil instead of the 14B. Some artists can just use 2 pencils, like a graphite pencil and a black colored pencil. That also works, and working with that is actually very similar to working with these Faber Castell matte graphite pencils. I'm just going to do a little bit of the neck here on the right side. The neck is going to be a little bit darker than most of the face because it's largely in the shadow created by the jaw and the helmet, because it's further away from the light source. So I'm going to shade that with a little bit more value. So once again, these are technically graphite pencils, but the composition of them is a little bit different, obviously, because they are not as shiny. I don't really know what exactly they are made of, but like I said, they feel a little bit more like a black colored pencil. Some of them are a little bit harder, others are a little bit softer and a little bit darker. I tend to prefer the darker ones, which is why I use them up so quickly. When I buy a set of these matte graphite pencils, I usually run out of the 12B and the 14B first, because they're very close to a black colored pencil, and I do a lot of work on my portraits with a black colored pencil. But I mean, regular graphite can obviously work as well. You can get a very nice range of value out of that, and you can also blend them a little bit better than these. These are a little bit harder. Graphite blends, I mean regular pure graphite blends better than this. And I think the tooth of the paper can help a little bit as well. Another thing that the tooth of the paper will give you is that fine texture that creates the illusion of the appearance of the skin. So you don't have to work on any of the tiny details on the skin, like dips or wrinkles or pores or anything like that. A lot of that work will be done for you by the pencil. You can only focus on some of the larger, more important shapes. And this would be especially useful if you were drawing somebody with let's say older skin, where you would have a lot more texture. Here it's not so much of a big deal. I'm finishing the work on the helmet here on the right side. Here and there I skipped a little bit of the drawing process, either because I did a few minutes of work off camera or because I just lost some footage. Every now and then a little bit of my footage gets corrupted for some reason. I have no idea why, but thankfully it's not a huge chunk. This is the shadow area between the shoulder and the body armor. So like I said, this is going to be a vignette, which means that I'm just going to draw the rest of the body armor here on the top part of the body, and then kind of fade that towards the lower edge of the paper. And this part of the drawing process is going to be, it usually takes just as long as the first part, which is drawing the face, because there's lots of detail here and lots of interesting textures. There are some lighter details like these, I don't know what those are, on those buckles, as well as the edges of some parts of that body armor. But like I said, I'm gonna maybe do most of this in time-lapse here, because maybe it's a little bit less interesting than the portrait itself. But then again, who knows, maybe some people would find this part of the drawing process more interesting. Either way, this is a shorter version of the video. If you want to see the full-length version, if you would like to know more, you should check out my Patreon. On my Patreon you can see hundreds of full-length drawing videos and a lot more additional content where I talk about my drawings at length and explain a lot more stuff, and I also talk more about the materials and the references and the commissions that I do, all kinds of stuff. So if you're really into drawing, maybe you should check out my Patreon. If not, you can just check out some of my other videos here on my channel. Maybe give me a like and subscribe, but if you don't want to, that's fine. You could just watch this video. It's all good. There's some kind of a triangular shape here, just above the chest area. I'm going to include that shape as well and just do a little bit of work under it and then fade the rest, basically creating a nice little vignette. Well, it's not a little vignette because it occupies a good portion of the paper. The portrait is a little bit larger considering the size of the paper. I was thinking about including maybe the top part of the body with some more details, but then I just decided to go for a regular vignette portrait. I don't really know if that was the best decision, but I had a couple of reference photos of the exact same scene, some of them better than the others. I'm going to share the one that I think is of highest quality with you. So maybe you can have a go at this one if you like. Maybe even in color, why not? Maybe I'll do something like this in colored pencil some other time. But for now, graphite, because I haven't done any work in graphite in a while. I often do a combination of regular graphite pencils and these matte graphite pencils. That also works pretty well because the regular graphite pencils have some of their advantages. They have an appeal of their own. They're just pleasant to work with. I think just the way that they apply on the paper, the way that they smudge and blend. But these are definitely a little bit darker, more matte. There's some kind of a pouch here on the shoulder, maybe with ammo, maybe first aid, who knows what it is. I'm not really familiar with the gear of the Starship Troopers. Anyway, just doing a little bit more shading on that. When I use regular graphite pencils, I usually use either the Faber Castell 9000 series or the Kohinoor ones. But like I said, I like to combine them with these, either these matte graphite pencils or some black colored pencil. I'm doing a little bit of erasing with a Tombow Mono Zero eraser. I just erased some final, smaller, lighter details, and now just doing some additional shading and final touches. I put my signature on the left side, but I'm not quite done. I'm just going to put down some finishing touches. I want to fix the appearance of the nose a little bit because I had some dots there that kind of look like freckles. And I need a little bit more value on this side as well. I felt that it was a little bit too much volume in the cheekbone area. So these are just some of the tiny final adjustments that I make once the portrait is 99% done. Just a little bit more shading here and there, just a little bit more work on some of the smaller details. Well, anyway, I'm pretty much done here. So once again, check out my other videos, and for longer videos, check out my Patreon. I hope you enjoyed the drawing process, and I hope you liked this one. I'm going to see you in the next video. Bye bye. Thanks for watching.